Hi everybody, welcome to the Actors Academy. So today what we're talking about is how to have a good self-tape audition, specifically 3 tips that you can use to help improve your self-tape audition. A lot of times people are making common mistakes. You could find 100 different mistakes that people are making, but we're going to boil it down to 3 main ones that I see a lot of the time, and 3 things that you can do to have a better self-tape audition. So the first thing, number 1, is make sure you know who you're talking to and you know where they are. A lot of times when people are recording, they'll have their person right here, they're talking to them, they're looking at them, and then for whatever reason, they're going to talk to them over here. And then when they're talking them to over here, then all of a sudden they're a little bit more this way. Their eye line keeps switching for the same character. You want to make sure that you have a good point of reference and you know where you're talking to, who you're talking to, where they are in the room. And that's something that you get to decide. You get to place them wherever you want. Generally, you're going to want this person to be maybe a foot away from the camera, a little bit more in this general area. If you have your camera right here, maybe you'll have them somewhere in this space over here, or if you choose to have them on this side, you get to decide that. But generally, you're going to want to know where they are. Now, if you have multiple people in the scene, you can switch. You could have someone here, and then you could look over here, and then maybe you look over here, depending on how many multiple characters you have. But we, as the audience, or the casting directors, when they're watching you, have to know, okay, you're talking to someone right here, oh, and you're talking to someone here, and you're talking to someone here. We have to realize this when we're watching it. But a lot of the times I see people talking to one person, and they're shifting, and they're in random places around the room. So make sure the first thing is you know where you're talking to, who it is, where they are in the room. You got to place them in a specific spot, and then you keep them there. Tip number 2. Make sure your reader now knows their lines. Now, they don't have to have the lines memorized. You have to have them memorized when you're going and doing your self-tape audition, but they do not need to have their lines memorized. What they do, though, need to have is the ability to go through the script and read it without hopefully making any mistakes. If you have little minor mistakes here or there, they switch a word, that's okay. But what you don't want to happen is you don't want them to be reading and then all of a sudden get lost or stuck and go, oh, I don't know, where am I? You don't want that to happen. Or you don't want them to jump to the wrong spot of the scene. So what you can do to help your reader out is print the sides, give it to your reader, and highlight their part. So then it's easier for them when they're going through and they know exactly where they are. And also let them have the script and read it a little bit before you guys start filming. Or maybe before you guys start filming, you do the lines, they do the lines. You guys are going back and forth. You don't just say, hey, here you go, here's the scene. Let's record, because then they're trying to learn along the way. And the problem with that is you could do your self-tape, you could be filming, it could be an amazing scene, and then they forget their lines, and then you have to redo the take. So just make sure to make it an easier process for yourself that the person you're reading with knows the lines at least decently. They've gone through it a few times, you've read it with them. You don't have to act it out when you're reading it. You could just have your lines, hey, how are you? And then they say, good, how are you doing? You're just going back and forth. It's a dialogue, but they need to be able to get used to the lines. So make sure you're incorporating that. Let the reader read the lines a little bit beforehand. Don't just give it to them and say, hey, let's start. You guys have a little bit of a practice session back and forth. Now, the third tip that I see actors making a big mistake on is how they frame themselves. Sometimes they have a lot of headroom above them, and they have like this much of the body, or they have so much space on the side, or they have a ton of things in the background. You have to make sure when you're filming, you got a blank background. You don't want anything distracting in the background. And you also want to make sure you have good framing, so they want to see you in the shot. So mainly what you're going to want for your frame, you're going to want something generally around this, right here. Not too much lower, not too much higher. Now, this is something that you can play with, though. Depending on the scene that you have, maybe you think, hey, I can portray this character better. They're going to like it better if I have a little bit more space. Maybe the scene, it feels like, hey, you need more space. They need to see more of your body moving. But generally, they're going to want to see your face. They're going to have a little bit of your shoulders, some of your chest in here. And then you're going to be talking and doing your scene working from this spot. You know, a little bit on the sides here. But you're not going to have it be so much space, a ton of space here, a ton of space here. You don't want that. You don't want it to get your legs at all. Some people think, hey, let me get my legs, my whole body's in here. It's not theater work. When you're filming for the camera, you're really just trying to get this general area. You know, you can shift it a little bit. Maybe it's a little higher. Maybe it's a little lower. Maybe a little bit more room on the sides or a little less. You can play. There's not an exact science to it, but it's a general area that you have to be playing within. The bonus tip now for all of you is this one. Get good lighting. This means either invest in getting lights so you can shine it on yourself, or have the window behind you and have the light coming in from outside. You don't want it to be too dark. You don't want too harsh of shadows coming in. You want to have a good general light source coming to you guys. Now, if you want a video on me talking about different lights that you can get or whatever, I can do that. But it's really simple. Just get lights, have good lighting, have it go over your face. Don't let anything be too harsh or too strong, because a lot of times I see people when they're recording, the lighting's terrible, or they're too overexposed and they got too much lighting. So it's a balance that you have to play with. Don't go too much, and also don't go too little. You want to have a happy medium. More so like if you were to go and look in the mirror, you just look natural how you are when the lights are on you. You don't want it to be like you have such a strong light here and a weak light over here, or you have bright lights in the background so no one can see your face and it's too dark. So those are my tips for you guys. Those are my 3 tips plus the bonus tip. Share it on social media. Let all the actors who are doing self-tapes realize, hey, this is how you need to do your self-tapes. Stop making these mistakes, because this will save a lot of people when they're doing their self-tapes. If you put in a bad self-tape and the casting director opens up your video and they see it's not very clean, it doesn't look very good, the lighting's not good, you have too much stuff in the background, your framing isn't right, instantly they're going to think, maybe not. You already have a negative point against you. So do what you can. Get the first thing they see, say, okay, everything looks good. Now let's see if they can act. You don't want the first thing for them to think is, why is it being filmed this way? This looks horrible. And then they're trying to see if you can act. You want to have a positive thing first, and then they see, okay, can you act? It does yourself a favor. Because otherwise they're going to think, I don't know about this, and it's just not going to look good for you. So you have a positive thing to start with. They see you, and they say, okay, now let's see if they can act. It'll help you guys in the long run.